Hello everyone, welcome to my interview with none other than the best of Yasuo from the Hartford Regional Qualifier, Complex. First and foremost, would you like to introduce yourself?
Um, Hello, my name is Complex. As I was just told, I was the best of Yasuo in Hartford. I still am, but now that Yasuo's out of the regionals, I won't be able to play Yasuo anymore. But I'm really happy to be here and doing this interview. I just want to talk about my deck, and I just hope as many people as possible will see this.
Alright, nice. So let's just get into the deck list then. Here it is on my screen. Just at a very high level, can you explain to me the general strategy of your deck and how it functions?
So when I was building this deck, generally, back in Atlanta, I tried to go for a more aggro approach. But unfortunately, I think aggro is just not sustainable in the meta. There was less Master Yi's then, and even then, the aggro strategy just simply did not work. After that, all I pretty much had to go off of was what could I do in my colors that work the best. And in green purple, I think the deck that works the best is Irelia. I'm not saying that Irelia is a completely perfect deck, but I think after sideboarding, Irelia becomes one of the stronger decks in the format. And instead of focusing on trying to be the most versatile deck or anything like that, my deck was purely revolving around the higher percentage of decks at the regional. From what I could tell from Lille or even the pre-RQ play rates, the most popular decks in the format were Yi, Diana, and Master Yi,
Mhm.
or Yi, Diana, and the like Aurora,
Aurora.
those type of things.
Mhm.
Yeah, Aurora, those type of things. And I was thinking, what's the best way I can get around these? And if I try to build a deck that covers for simply just Aurora, it's going to fall into Yi and then it's going to fall into Diana.
Mhm.
So I want to focus on where I could shine the most, and I felt as if building a deck that covers mainly the Yi, Diana, and Aurelia matchup was probably my best chance of winning like any of my major matchups. So if you want to look at my deck list, you can see a lot of the main board. For example, Vex Cheerless. I'll talk about it further, but Vex Cheerless, just in short, is a really decent card into most of those matchups, where it might not be as good into matchups like LeBlanc or Aurora. So my deck was pretty much just trying to cover as most bases as possible, but at the same time, even at the same time, it may fall into other deck lists. I feel like being good into a majority of the deck lists is what I was trying to accomplish with the colors.
Alright, cool. So now I guess we can move on to the individual cards of your deck. Just at a glance, as you kind of described already, your deck contains a lot of more unconventional cards. So for example, I guess we can start at the two drops. Um, you are running 6 units and 3 Zonias as your two drops. Would you like to explain your choices for that?
So when I was looking at like what I really need to do, I think hitting two drops is very important into, or hitting two drops into the matchups right now are most important into the decks that will blow you out completely in the later game, which is Aurora. But as I said, I need to focus more on the matchups where I can actually do stuff against. Missing a two drop into Yi or Diana isn't completely game losing, I feel, in this meta. And because of that, I was able to run just 8 2 drops. And 8 2 drops I know is maybe around the sweet spot of what people say is really good,
Oh, don't you have
but
9 2 drops?
if the yes, 9 2 drops, my bad. 9 2 drops is 9 or the 8 are where the averages around. I felt like if I wanted to consistently get a 2 drop and if I miss it sometimes I'm still fine, that was the best case for it. And for the 2 drop choices, Scuttle Crab I feel like is probably one of the best 2 drops in the game, simply because it can replace a card in your hand, and also later game you can just swing to a battlefield and have perfect lines on what you want to do. And very reminiscent in Aurelia, for if an Aurelia can see what's in your hand and play around everything perfectly, Aurelia probably has one of the strongest combats if they know what they're playing around. Tide Turner is honestly, I believe, one of the weaker 2 drops in the deck. Tide
Right.
Turner is simply weaker because the one of the biggest strengths in like the Aurelia deck list, for example, is being able to switch around the Stellar Corn or move a unit back to base and have it protected in base. But Yasuo's ability lets you do that almost for the same price. Tide Turner is simply in the deck for the hidden purpose of it, and also not missing a 2 drop in the matchups that really matter. If you One thing I did very often at both the regionals was hiding a Tide Turner at a battlefield where I may control both battlefields, and I can just Tide Turner my Vex Cheerless into a battlefield. Doing so forces them into a combat, so if they want to be doing anything, they pay more for it. With just that threat alone, they are forced to use all their interaction at base, and if they're forced to use interaction at base, they can get blown out much easier. Zonia's Hourglass is really good in the deck, just because this deck kind of functions almost like a Protect the Queen deck. It's less Protect the Queen just because I run more units than Irelia, for example.
Mhm.
But if I'm able to play Zonia's Hourglass into a Vex or Irelia and they don't have an answer for it, I can lap them pretty easily just because I have such a strong presence on the board. The other thing about Zonias is being able to play a Scuttle Crab and on the Death Knell reacting with a Zonias, and I can get a Zonias out decently on curve with no units
Mm,
else on board for
right.
just one power. That is very strong. I think Zonias and Scuttle Crab are the two best two drops in the deck. And if you guys are looking at anything for like what you may want to cut, I think Tide Turner is insane in Aurelia, but I feel like it's slightly worse in Yasuo.
Mhm.
But again, Origins is gone, so I don't know how useful that information will be. But those were generally my consensus for two drops. I think two drops are very strong, and I feel like 9 or 8 is like the sweet point if you're trying to just keep up with some of the other popular decks.
Okay, so I have another question for you. This might be a hard one to answer, but I want you to be honest. Do you think Yasuo is a very good legend or not?
If I'm being 100% honest, he could be the best. He could be a very decent legend. But I feel as though most legends in the format have to have three good things about them, and I think that just goes from their legend, their chosen champion, and their signature spell. If we look at Aurelia, for example, she has a really good signature spell, a really good unit, and a really good effect on her legend.
Mhm.
If we look at Yasuo, he has a okay legend ability. I'm not saying his legend ability is bad. It's honestly decent.
It's
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 it's it's a
okay,
decent
yeah.
legend ability. It's okay, exactly. But his champion unit is not very good. His signature spell is kind of unplayable. I tried to fit in the deck. It did not fit. It's a cool signature spell, but it's just too expensive, even with Vex discounting it. Too conditional and everything.
Mhm.
So when you look at legends through that way, I think Yasuo, if he had a better chosen champion, I feel though he could be a lot better. But as of now, the only thing that like makes him somewhat playable are simply his color pair and the effect of his ability. With things in the format like Stellar Corn and like an emphasis on keeping stuff in base to keep things safe, just because there's less in base removal into the harder matchups, other than like Starcrossed, which you have like Defy for and stuff. The matchup be or the legend itself is generally decent. I think the ability is just worse than Aurelia because you have to invest the resources before you want to do anything. So you can't move up there and then gank with his ability like Aurelia might be able to. You have to commit it first, and if you get blown out, you're out of the legend ability for the rest of the turn. That's the only part of Yasuo that I feel is pretty clunky. It's where I may move up with a unit with boots, and I have to do that beforehand, and then it gets rebuked, and I no longer can accelerate anything from my hand.
Mhm.
But other than that, I feel like having the constant threat of being able to accelerate something is pretty strong, and I feel like the color pairing is probably one of the best in the game at the moment. But he simply lacks the signature spell and a good unit in the champ zone to really keep him on the board. So, unfortunately, I can't say he really has a place in the meta, but I think just having a strong color pair is something that you have to look out for when you're fighting a Yasuo.
All right, nice. Do you also want to explain your battlefield choices for this deck? I see you got a very Diana-like selection of battlefields here.
Yeah, I would honestly say more Aurelia like. The Aurelia list I take from was right after Lille. I was copying one of the best of Yasuo's Crows.
Mhm.
Originally I only kept Targon's Peak and Abandoned Hall, but I was convinced on Rockfall. I feel like Rockfall as a blind battlefield is just super strong into a lot of stuff. First of all, the Master Yi matchup, which already is hard despite mainboarding for the whole matchup, it prevents Orange Rengar from going there.
Right.
If I'm able to go on one of those battlefields and not have to worry about an Orange Rengar, or even seeing an opponent mess up playing a Rengar there because they forgot, that's kind of just game winning at some points. Being able to just put a unit at Rockfall Path and not have to worry about Orange Rengar is very what's it called? Very like relieving to almost feel. And also into some of the other matchups, for example, LeBlanc, if you win a dice roll against LeBlanc and you're able to just play a 2-drop there like a tide turner, they have to invest so much just to get over it. And if they're trying to get over it and they can't, they are locked out for like 2 points in their turn because they probably don't want to move up a unit to a rockfall just to not play a unit there.
Right, because they
Um,
can't use their legend ability.
Exactly, yeah.
Hmm.
And that takes out one of probably the hardest matchups, which is LeBlanc, which I'll go into later. But I feel like Rockfall Path as a blind battlefield is just so strong because it shuts down probably like 30% of the decks. It doesn't do much into Diana other than shutting off Tide Turner, but it prevents also Purple Vex from just being slammed on a battlefield, which if you lose a dice roll, it kind of can suck if you can't just move up a unit there and slam it. But the I feel like the benefits outweigh the negatives at all times. And a smaller other thing that you can do if your opponent may not know like your complete limits and stuff is if you can still hide a tide turner there and like feint a spell if you're really out of answers. But the only downside to it is you can't slam Vex on the battlefield if you move up with a 2-drop, which already is a risky play, and you also can't flip a tide turner. But at the same time, you are safe from Orange Rengar in a lot of cases, which is honestly a really good trade-off for what that is, because there's a lot of Orange Rengar at like everything right now.
Yeah, it seems like a good deal to me, is what I was about to say.
Yep,
Uh,
exactly.
okay, so what about your other battlefields then? You're going first for Targon's Peak, or you're going second for Event Hall?
Yeah, so going first for Targon's Peak, I think one of the scariest things when fighting a thing or fighting an Irelia deck is when they move a 2-drop up to Targon's Peak and untap with 2 runes. If you try to swing into that battlefield, you can be punished so hard if they have the answers, even if they don't have the answers. So a lot of the times when I move up with a 2-drop to Targon's Peak and untap 2 runes, my opponent will just not swing into that battlefield because they can get blown out so easily by it. Or they have to waste one of their own cards to do it, and I didn't have to waste anything. So I feel like Targon's going first is always just good, even if you don't even have an initial 2-drop in hand. Being able to untap 2 runes at the end of your turn and threaten like most of your spells that are 2 mana or become cheaper because of Vex is just pretty much opening up every reaction or action in your deck on your opponent's turn. And because of that, it's really strong. And also the other decks that can utilize it, mainly Irelia, or the other decks that mainly utilize it are only Irelia, and Diana can also utilize it pretty well. But I feel like Irelia has a slight edge on utilizing over Diana, and a lot of this deck is reminiscent of Irelia. So when you're thinking about it like that, we benefit more of Targons than your opponent does, especially if we're getting the first activation of it. And for the going second battlefield, Abandoned Hall, I hate comparing this deck so much to Aurelia because I there's a lot of Aurelia players, and I know you've already all heard this a million times. But being able to go in an Abandoned Hall with an Aurelia or a Vex and being able to pump your guy up by 2 or potentially just 1 is enough to pretty much just like shift the entire combat. And most of the time in our colors, you are running more spells than your opponent pretty much is going to be able to, and you'll just be able to utilize Abandoned Hall much better. Especially, you're not even being punished for it. You're not being punished for it by going second because you have no rush to get on it if you don't get a 2-drop on there immediately. The battlefield's very good later game and help you keep up with things like Diana or Master Yi, which typically can have a lot of might because of just a +2 for me or just Diana Hui moving twice. The both All these battlefields I feel like accomplish what Yasuo wants to or the color identity wants to really well, and I feel like you can utilize it a lot better than your opponents can.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That was very in-depth. Do you mind if we take a look at some of the more weirder, nicher cards of your deck? Some of them I realize you have like a lot of one-ofs. You have like a one of Flash, for example, a one of Swifties, a one of Switcheroo, and of course the Vex Cheerless is also pretty unconventional when it comes to Yasuo decks. And I also noticed you have both 2 of Rebuke and also 2 of Starcross. Do you want to maybe start with that first? Because I know a lot of people, they don't really run Rebuke much anymore. They run Starcross instead, but I do see you're running both.
So when I was thinking of what I wanted to run for almost removal, I feel like some of the worst things in our color is just straight up removal. It's the only like actual removal we have is things like charm, but charm requires me to pump up might and also be potentially punished for using it. So when I was thinking about that, I was trying to think of ways I would be able to go like I was able to win combats unconventionally. So when I When I saw Rebuke and I looked at a lot of lists were running less not so fast in the meta. Because back in set two, the Draven era and stuff all that stuff like that, not so fast was almost like a three of in a lot of decks. Just
Mhm.
because Rebuke was so prevalent and could just lose you a combat entirely. Now everyone was cutting back on the not so fast just to play Defy for the
Mhm.
Starcross because Defy hits so many more things now. Because of that, Rebuke kind of stood out to me as something that could blow my opponent out and they couldn't do anything about it. I've had many games where my opponents will be forced to buff up their units in base because they want to get around paying the Vex Cheerless cost, and when they do that, they come in and they get rebuked and they can't do anything about it. Even if they have a Defy in hand, they can't defy it, and it's just a complete blowout, and it's works really well at removing a unit for like an entire turn. And honestly, that whole one turn that the rebuke will buy you is probably worth it to just get that extra point you need to win or just win on the spot. It's also it's also very good into matchups that are heavily like I don't want to say big unit dependent, but if a LeBlanc swings up with something and you rebuke it, there is like pretty much nothing they can do other
Mhm.
than sacrificing it, which gets rid of the problem entirely. Rebuke, I feel, has a very strong place in the format, despite the high power cost, because you're able to get rid of mostly everything, and they can't do anything about it other than hard bargain and not so fast, which ideally you have an answer to. You can pay, first of all, you can defy both of those, or you just pay for the hard bargain. Rebuke is a card that has very little counterplay around it, and because of that, the strength of it is still very good in this meta.
Alright, cool. So it sounds like that was just a very good meta read from you. Similarly, I think you also have a one of switcheroo in your deck. Is that also for a similar reason to Rebuke, or is it for a different purpose?
So it's similar to Rebuke in a sense where it just becomes significantly cheaper because of Vex Cheerless. I'm allowed to play with just one mana if I really want to. But the main use of a switcheroo that I used throughout the entire regional was fainting a hidden card. Most of the hidden cards this set have been what's it called, Tide Turners or Zonias. Like if you see a Master Yi hide a card, it should just Zonias. They're not going to do anything about that. And most of the people I fought assumed the same thing. They assumed it was going to be a Zonias or it was going to be a Tide Turner. When I pull out the switcheroo and I win the entire combat, that completely shifts the whole tempo of the entire game. Also, it is pretty much has a similar effect to Rebuke where I will win a combat if I'm able to get it off properly. It's a little less versatile than Rebuke, but at the same time, it's a hidden card that your opponent will not know about. In set one and two, for example, I was big on the running a one or two of the purple Teemo, just because it was a four might swing for just one recycle cost, and Switcheroo has a very similar place in that. And having your opponent have to answer to that, and the only counters for that being not so fast and hard bargain is still very strong. And keep in mind, if I'm using Switcheroo on my combat and I have a purple Vex on the field, to counterplay that, if they have any counterspell or any like pump spells afterwards, they have to invest so much resources into it. Where I pretty much, if I lose one unit, I'm still happy with how the combat ended out.
Okay, so yeah, it sounds like this purple Vex card is a pretty core unit in your deck. It almost seems like your deck is almost built around it by all these spells that are like two and like two power or like two and one power or whatever. Do you want to explain why you have three purple Vex and like only two Irelia, for example? Because I feel like that is pretty uncommon in Yasuo decks.
So when I was thinking of a way this deck would be able to function around like most of the other cards in the meta for like Diana, Master Yi, and all that kind of stuff, most of their interaction is in combat. When I have to use a punch first, one and two recycle, that's already delivering for them. And if they win the combat, they can kind of sweep by for it. If they have to deal with a purple Vex on the field, they will have to invest so much stuff into pumping things up at base. And once they move up with that, you can see most of my other things to blow them out. I run five things that can just pretty much win me a combat after they do that. And because of that, and I'm also allowed to play this for a lot cheaper because of the purple Vex.
Mhm.
I'm investing so the purple Vex pays for itself within one spell. And if I'm able to get one spell and win an entire combat and put them back an entire turn, that's still incredibly worth it. The only downside to playing purple Vex is the lack of deflect. A great thing about Aurelia is that she has no power cost, and you're able to just slam her down, and you're just fine with that if you're just developing your board. For Vex, the biggest things you have to keep in mind is if you get caught in a star cross loop against Diana and you don't have any counterplay, you are in a pretty bad spot. But at the same time, I feel like that was a risk I was willing to take just because I want to have a good matchup into Master Yi. And honestly, my idea for Purple Vex came from a lot of Master Yis like complaining that the one of I read in my Irelia sideboard said, yeah, that card's kind of screwed up for me if I can't like immediately charm it or challenge it. And if it just sticks on the field with like Zonius, for example, there's not much they can really do against it. The only thing Master Yi really can do against it is if they're able to double charm or double challenge or just have two of those in hand. First of all, they're down two cards, and half the time, if they want to charm me in, if I have one mana up, I can either flash my guy down or I can just ride the wind to the other battlefield. Or I could just rebuke it and win that
Or
combat half the
switcheroo,
time.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, or switcheroo. I have so much things where charm is not really a good answer into Vex, where the only good answers are like the bounce spells like Starcrossed or Challenge. But in which case, I can hopefully defy it. I can hopefully do anything around that. There's just so much. I feel like there's so many hoops you have to run through just to kill a purple Vex in a sense where it's such like a good threat on the board. And because of that, I had to run three of just because I felt like it was insanely good into the matchups where I want to shine in, which would be the Irelia Diana Master Yi matchups. But you will notice later that in some of my matches where I fight like a Leblanc, for example, they just come out. That card is completely useless in some matchups, but is so good in some other matchups, which is what I really want to shine with this like whole RQ to deal with the matchups that were hard, and hopefully I can squeak by on the matchups that were a little harder. That's all.
I see, I see. Okay, so should we talk about Boots of Swiftness and Flash together, maybe?
Yeah, for sure.
Alright.
Yeah, when I was thinking of Boots of Swiftness, in Aurelia, this card is I think like a three of in every deck. Just because if you're able to ready it and move it around wherever you want, plus it's a discipline for 2 might and have ganking. But in Yasuo, the biggest issue with Boots of Swiftness is you have a lot less flexibility with your Legend ability. You have to first equip Boots of Swiftness and then Yasuo ability your unit up to gank it over. You can't move it up, then equip it, then Yasuo ability. Because of that, you're sinking 2 in 1 recycle for a thing that may not even work. Because of that, it's only a one of because if I don't see it, my game plan can still remain the same. If I can see it and it works out, it's working pretty well.
Mhm.
And with the one of like theme going on, is we all see that with Flash. If one of the biggest strengths in decks I see that perform well is like the least they can commit to a battlefield is probably what makes a deck a lot stronger than other decks. We can see that with Diana's flashing back their Hui just to keep it safe after you committed stuff to go over them. The more someone commits to a battlefield, and the more you're able to just pull back and swing back next turn, is super strong. Over the RQ, my two best cards in my entire deck that shine the best was Flash and Rebuke. Both those cards were doing so well for me just because they weren't flooding my hand and they always had to use my hand too. Like I said, one of my favorite things to do is when they pump up their thing in base to just to move up to get rebuked. Another thing I love doing is when they pump up their thing in base and then I flash it back and nothing changes. It's like they go through so many hoops just to play around this thing, but Flash can just get me out of any situation I want. Because of that, that card is so strong. It can also enable ganking later game. Flash is just one of those cards where if you run more of it, it can actually flood your hand. But
Mm.
if you only run a one of or a two of, it can be so versatile and so flexible, and there's so little counterplay around it. And because of that, I feel like those both as a one of actually were decent for what they were going. They accomplished what they were going for, and that's the good thing about them.
Okay, cool. Thank you for explaining your card choices. Along with the cards you included in your deck, I would also like to know some cards that are usually pretty conventionally popular in Yasuo decks that didn't really make the cut for you. So, for example, most Yasuos I see run stuff like Heart of Dark Eyes, like Purple Kha'Zix, Back Off, and even stuff like what's it called, like Baron Nashor sometimes I see as well. Do you want to explain why those didn't quite make the cut for you?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, the one I want to talk about mainly is Kha'Zix. I believe the last correct me if I'm mistaken, but
Mhm.
I think the last two or three Yasuo lists did run purple Kha'Zix in their main board, and they were able to get best of it with Kha'Zix. I am not denying that Kha'Zix is a very strong card, but I feel like I just do not like the card due to how easy it is to get punished for. If you're able to play Kha'Zix and then they punch first and they even trade or something with it, you are down a card in your hand, you're down a power, and the XP literally does nothing for you. Having a 4-1 recycle 6 might is very strong. I completely agree with that. But if you're able to just get blown out from it that easily, what's the point? It's your opponents can you're forcing your opponent to use stuff in their hand to get around it, but at the same time you also have something in your hand to get around it as well, and there's no other benefit other than that. I feel like I'd rather play something like a purple Vex or just an Irelia to base and hold off for another turn. Also, another thing that I think is super important in my deck list is the little recycle cost. Recycling early hurts so much for Yasuo just because I don't want to talk too much about my chosen champion yet, but if all else fails, you can always just play your chosen champion. And if you have to recycle down to 6 to 4, that sucks. If you have to recycle down from like 6 to 3 because you recycled one earlier that game, that's even worse. Um, I think you cannot really waste a power cost unless it's a card as impactful as Vex Cheerless. And you'll notice that in most of my cards over here, where all my cards I recycle are so strong that they will buy me an entire turn. Kha'Zix is not something I can just slam at base and pass like casually. It has I think, a very awkward might threshold just as 4 as well. And I think if Kha'Zix didn't recycle, he'd be broken, first of all, but I feel like he'd fit a lot better into what my deck was trying to do, but I feel like recycling is just too much of a cost I cannot pay early game. And let's see what else we have here. Into a very similar idea, Harder Dark Ice also fits that category of having to pay a recycle for a card that does something. I was messing around with Harder Dark Ice when I was first building the deck, and there was a card that a lot of Master Yis were kind of mainboarding, which was Akshan.
Akshan, right?
Exactly. There's Akshan, there's acceptable losses in the format. People are putting so much mainboard gear hate where Zonia's already felt clunky enough, even though I love Zonia's, but I have to recycle one and then get punished for it just to play a Harder Dark Ice. It's a reusable discipline in On Guard and all that kind of stuff. It feels good when I can do stuff, but I don't like just having to slam a Harder Dark Ice past just to keep up with tempo just for it to get stolen or destroyed. Because of that, I felt like I just had to roll with the punches a lot of the time and just make do with my discipline and on guards, and hopefully my switcheroos or rebukes can keep up with the format. And for the last one, back off. When I was trying to build a deck, something I was trying to go for was I have to be able to deal with threats permanently, or somewhat permanently. If I'm able to rebuke let's just say a Rengar, for example, worst case, they have to spend their entire turn replaying it or do something else. If I just back off a unit, half the time I won't even draw a card because I'm playing it from hidden, but it's also just preventing that unit from attacking for one turn. Where rebuke or something, it forces them to spend pretty much a turn and a half to be able to replay that unit and do stuff with it. Because of that, I felt like back off just did not really have a place in the deck because it buys me a little bit of a turn, but it's less versatile than something like rebuke and Starcrossed, which, let's face it, ideally I'm paying for less than how much back off would cost
So,
because of purple Vex.
so in other words, back off, like, it doesn't slow the enemy down as much as you'd like it would.
Exactly. Yep.
Mm.
It's like rebuke. If I rebuke a LeBlanc like Riptide Rex, they're fuming. They do not like that. But if I back off a Riptide Rex, it's still on the field. They can still do whatever they want to it, and I don't deal with the threat like that much. And like the draw one, if I play it from my hand, I'm spending 2 mana to have like maybe sometimes a worse discipline. Having as a hidden kind of helps, but at the same time, it just does not perform as well as something just like a good rebuke or a good Starcross would perform.
Okay, and another card that's missing from the list we have visually right here is actually Stack Deck. I realized you weren't running any. Do you want to talk about that? Because I know that card is usually like a 3 of in every purple deck, aside from like coincidentally Aurelia. Do you want to explain why?
You just do not have room for stack deck. If you stack deck is good. Stack deck is the 1 mana is such a tempo loss early game where it's only really good late game. And in late game, there's already so many answers you have to find. Ideally, that stack deck could just be the answer that you want. If like I know this is like in a completely ideal world. If let's just say I cut the flash for a stack deck, and then I stack deck, and hopefully the flash is the answer I need. I'm still spending 2 mana. I'm spending 3 mana for that flash now, and also I have to dig through my deck, put 2 other cards up on my deck. I feel like you can't afford to have 3 cards in your deck just to be an answer to find the other cards in your deck. If the other cards in your deck are so powerful, it's like I cannot imagine running less than 2 rebukes in my deck just because how strong that card is. And if I don't draw it, that like sucks and everything, but you kind of just have to roll with the punches at this kind of deck if you have to keep up with the other things. It's like I can't perfectly sideboard all my Gus main board for the LeBlanc matchup. It's like I have to run those in my sideboard, and sometimes I just have to like accept the fact that hey, this LeBlanc matchup is going to be a little harder just because I don't have the correct tools in my deck. And I feel like I have to deal with that, and I hopefully have to see the cards that Stack Deck replaced in the deck when I need them to. Stack Deck, I think, is a very powerful card, but at the same time, it doesn't. It's a big tempo loss sometimes early game, and only is really good later. I want to say.
Sorry, I found that so funny for some reason.
No, no, no. It's fine. I hate Stack Deck. You're right. You're right. Don't worry.
Okay, cool. That makes a lot of sense actually. There is another elephant in the room I think we haven't addressed yet with your deck list actually. Speaking of unconventional cards, your Legend Champion. Why is it green Yasuo when every single other Yasuo list I've seen runs purple Yasuo?
This is like probably one of the more like controversial opinions I have on the Yasuo list. Just because for some reason purple Yasuo people love purple Yasuo. People love the fact that they can score a point for the third time you move. I don't think you can afford to run purple Yasuo in the main in on the in the champ zone. There, I think a green Yasuo is overpriced. I think his effect is not worth the power you are playing to pay him. But Master Yi can't really do much against a green Yasuo attack. Unless there's a Rune Runner on the field, one Discipline in base, move Yasuo up there, they cannot punch first in reaction to it. They cannot use any action spell in reaction to the green Yasuo ability. They can only use Discipline and On Guard, which ideally you can just defy. There's so little that a lot of decks can do to a Yasuo attack trigger because there's a lot less reactions like in the format. And green Yasuo kind of sucks just to play on curve. Green Yasuo is kind of just like a last ditch effort if you don't if you didn't draw that purple Vex in time. But having a purple Yasuo on board, if they do not deal with that like next turn, half the time the green Yasuo is going to be able to go over whatever battlefield you need him to. Green Yasuo does his job really well, but he's just completely overpriced. When you look at purple Yasuo, 5-in-1 recycle is already so awkward for an effect that does not change combat at all. You half the time purple Yasuo is good is maybe when you're at 5 and they push both their units away from base or from the battlefields and you can just win off the game off that. But at the same time, if your opponent is, I don't want to say if they're smart, if they keep one unit at a battlefield while you untap with 9 mana, you have just enough mana to Yasuo ride the wind and Yasuo it down if both battlefields are open. But you're playing with a 4 might unit. You need more than 9 mana if you want to do a surprise win off purple Yasuo, and so you need 11 mana to make him a 6 might with discipline. It's not 4 might is so awkward and will not get over like anything in the format. It will trade with half of the Yi things.
It
It
trades with
dies to a
two
stall.
drops. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It dies to a stalwart Poro, first of all. It trades with a lonely Poro for 5-in-1 recycle. He is such a clunky unit where he's barely point acceleration because there's so many answers for it. You need a card in your hand to supplement the ability that he wants to use. And it's just so awkward to play with. I think at the RQs, I've only won off Purple Yasuo once, and I've been to 3 RQs. I tried to make him work in a lot of decks, but just having Purple Yasuo as a threat and being able to accelerate him at like 8-and-2 recycle is still a really good rate. They have to play around you so much where if they forget about purple green Yasuo, they are punished. If they are forced to play around green Yasuo, they are playing your game and you're not playing their game. It's Green Yasuo is strong in that sense, and purple Yasuo is just like a bum who sits in the champ zone who doesn't do a lot. I'm just being completely honest here. You will notice I do run one in the sideboard because there's only one like matchup where I think purple Yasuo can shine, which is the Lux Infinite. If you're able to get that one extra point earlier against a Lux Infinite, you can kind of win the game off that. But if you're not fighting the Lux Infinite, he doesn't really do anything. He's a 4-might who will train to like anything you want to swing into. Because of that, he's just so awkward, and Green Yasuo, as much as he isn't very good either, he just is a objectively better chosen champion, I feel.
All right, well, thank you for that explanation. I guess the final thing for your deck list right here is going to be the sideboard. Yeah, okay, here it is. Yeah, so I noticed you have a 3 Gust sideboard, 1 Not So Fast, 2 Adaptatron, an extra copy of Vex Apathetic, and then that purple Yasuo we just went over. So I guess I would like to know what each card is for what matchup and what you'd side them in. Into in 4?
Yeah, for sure. So I will just say I already talked about it a little bit. My like nightmare matchup for the main deck is probably just LeBlanc. LeBlanc can run you over if you can't stop her, and the only things that can really stop her in my deck are the Rebuke and the Starcross, which are already conditional in itself. So when I do sideboard into LeBlanc, mostly I put the Gusts in and I put the Purple Vexes in. And maybe I can put Not So Fast in. Just depends like what their deck list specifically looks like, just because I know there's a few variations out there. But Gust is, if you get a good Gust against LeBlanc, you can just stay up on so much tempo and you're able to actually deal with what they want to do. What's it called? Purple Vex. Also, if you just slam that on a battlefield, they are in a pretty bad position where they can't really do much other than create a copy and then simply pass the turn to you. This sideboard is primarily for LeBlanc. I felt
Mm.
like LeBlanc was going to be one of the other most represented champions at the RQ, and I was kind of right. The play rate did drop a little bit, but you'll notice I did fight two LeBlancs throughout my entire thing, so I felt like it was worthwhile for me to do that. And the not so fast choice was mainly just added because, like I said, if my opponent is running Starcross, that can blow me out if I am almost bad on curve with my purple Vex. Being able to not so fast, also being able to not so fast things like Irresistible Fate Folk, where they may move up and have a bad move just because they didn't calculate for not so fast. Not so fast is a very strong card because it is almost unexpected kind of in this meta. There are so little decks running just a complete counterspell to some interaction. Like I said with the Rebuke, if one of my Rebukes over the RQ got not so fasted, I would have been completely shocked because so little people are running not so fast in the side or the main board. And like luckily none of my Rebukes were not so fasted, but if if like it's such a blowout if you do not prepare for a not so fast, and if half the time your opponent will not prepare not so fast. Adaptatron is honestly one of the more like kind of controversial sideboard things I added, just because things like Disarming Rake are pretty popular as well. Having instant speed removal in some decks is a lot better, but Adaptatron, I think strictly in Yasuo is better than Disarming Rake, just because in Irelia, one of the hardest things with Adaptatron is if there's a what is it called? A Aurora on board and you play a Adaptatron, you're gonna have to ready the Adaptatron to kill the Aurora in time, which in that case, Disarming Rake might just be better. You're investing one power instead of two. But in Yasuo, he almost has no commitment to that because his ability doesn't have recycle costs. If you're untapping with 6, you can just Adaptatron, Yasuo ability it up to a place, and then destroy a gear on the field. That is super strong in itself, and because of that, I felt like Adaptatron was better than Disarming Rake. I'm able to just play a body and also kill a gear if I have enough mana. It's also just a decent 4-drop if I don't get like Celicorn. And because of that, I believe it's better than Disarming Rake, but I can see the arguments for other decks running Disarming Rake. My other one is a third copy of Vex Apathetic. I agree in a sense where I think 3 purple Vex can be excessive. I notice a lot of purple decks running just a 2 of because that card is so consistent, but the main matchups I was thinking Vex Apathetic is good into is the Rengar matchup and the LeBlanc matchup. Just putting one more purple Vex into a Rengar matchup can slow their whole game down by like a whole turn, which is very strong in itself. And also, it's very good into LeBlanc. It kind of was like a no-brainer for me to add to the sideboard just because it covered, again, 2 of some of the most represented decks in the whole format. It turns down a lot of acceleration. It just is a super strong card and it has very little commitment because it's just 4. You slam it to the battlefield, you slam it to base, and you can just pass the turn on turn 2. And the last one is Purple Yasuo, just because I thought Lux Infinite was going to be very, very popular. I think there was only like 40 Lux Infinites in the entire RQ. I didn't fight a single one, so Purple Yasuo probably could have gone, and I could have just added literally anything else. Probably a second not so fast, to be completely honest. But I felt as though Lux was a big enough threat where
Mm.
I don't run enough 2-drop units where I'm able to just constantly get those 2 points every turn and outspeed them, where that Purple Yasuo actually could have come in handy. He
Right.
didn't, but he's just there because the matchup kind of is scary because like Aurelia, if I don't have a 2-drop unit in hand, I can kind of get behind on points.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine that purple Yasuo would also be good into Aurora, which is a little more popular deck as well.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's
Hmm.
decent to Aurora, but the what is it called? It's I will just say, blind purple Yasuo into Aurora is not as bad as it kind of seems. I believe one of my Aurora wins in the pre-RQ was because purple Yasuo or green Yasuo was able to trade with. I think I was able to trade my green Yasuo with a Mind Splitter they played, which is kind of strong, but at the same time, purple Yasuo honestly is decent into Aurora. I will just say I can see arguments for both of them, but I can see a bigger argument for purple Yasuo. But you probably won't be finding many Auroras anyway. I'd somehow have dodged a ton of Aurora, but yeah, I see what you're saying. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Do you want to talk about the run you had at Hartford itself? I know you were the only Yasuo that made day 2 at Hartford, so yeah, why don't you give us a rundown on how that went?
Yeah, for sure. My match run was a buy. I'm in more of a like I don't want to say like less populated area, but I'm my skirmish win. I'll be able to get skirmish win at some of my things just because I will be honest, I didn't play Yasuo at the skirmishes. I played Irelia to get the win, but I went to Yasuo here, and yep, I just got a buy for round one. For round two, my opponent did no show, but that did
Are you a
go
fraud?
yeah, exactly. Their round one buy was consumed, and nobody noticed, and then they just dropped him round two. Luckily, it was a Leblanc, which is again my bad matchup. So I was able to get past. I was able to sneak past a matchup. Round three, it was a Rengar. I noticed the name
Oh,
and I asked the
Boulevard.
guy. He was Boulevard. This was a top eight Rengar, I believe at Vancouver or maybe he was Atlanta. He was either way. I noticed his name. He was really chill, really awesome, but. My deck is simply not boarded for Rengar. I was able to take a game off, but I lost die roll, and round three it was Arena's greatest. My deck can barely keep up as itself, and Purple Vex is just a completely dead card in this matchup because it only really hits the punch first and the thrill of the hunt, which is less useful than if they had like more disciplines or other spells in their hand. They play a ton of units, and I can't really. Purple Vex doesn't hit units, only hit spells. But I lost that one in three. Um, I only won round two because I was able to top deck a discipline off of a discipline. So the one game I won was honestly kind of lucky. Rengar, like I said, is one of my worst matchups even after sideboarding. That one other purple apathetic Vex does do work, but just simply not enough.
Mm.
This deck was not built for Rengar, all that kind of stuff. Round four, I fought a Master Yi. My deck did exactly what it needed to do, and I was able to just purple Vex my way to win because they had to recycle way too much. I was still able to go over them, and it was just a perfect like definition of what the deck should do. Match five, I actually fought a LeBlanc this time. This one showed up, and it was a very hard matchup. Just put it simply, I won round one because I had some very good timed rebukes, and I won the die roll on Rockball Path. I had a purple Vex and a two-drop Tide Turner in my hand. Turn one, I just play Tide Turner pass. He plays, I think, like a bird to base. I move up with Tide Turner to the other battlefield and I slam a Purple Vex on there. Cannot really do much on his turn other than try to develop. If he swings up there, he can be punished because he can't create a copy of it. He doesn't really benefit from it.
That's
So
very
I
cool.
believe his turn was just a baited hook pass. But yeah, LeBlanc can be put pretty far behind if you're able to get a really good hand like that. Round two after the sideboarding, he was going first. He had an advantage. I didn't see a single gust in those games, and I got rolled a little bit just because he got the ball rolling before I really could. And round three, my sideboard did exactly what I wanted to do. I saw my gust I wanted to see. I was able to not so fast what I needed to. I star crossed his ruined Rex a few times. He was, it was honestly kind of unfortunate just because my pre side my post sideboard against LeBlanc is really very reminiscent of Diana, and Diana is pretty good into LeBlanc.
Mhm.
It's a little rough for LeBlanc. Yeah, my match six was against a Fiora. I believe this for Fiora did win best of, so it's kind of cool that to see I fought like the best of Fiora and I lost. But the Fiora matchup was just simply it's very reminiscent of where they have to use spells mid combat for stuff like that. And even with the Vex tax, they were able to sneak past the win a few times just because they were able to have a few better timed hidden blades, a few better overpriced punch first. They were able to get over whatever they needed to. It was just honestly a little unlucky on my part, but he was a good player. I probably misplayed a few times, but that matchup wasn't like too hard for me. My match seven was a Kaisa. Um, This matchup I thought was super interesting, just
Hmm.
because I played a lot of Irelia back when Kai'Sa was probably like the third most popular deck. It was like Draven,
Hmm.
Kai'Sa, and Irelia. Irelia naturally was a pretty good counter into Kai'Sa, and in this case, I want to say this deck kind of functioned very similarly to how Irelia used to function, where you were able to just play like the Urzonia, Slam Irelia, Slam Stalacorn. They have to invest so much. You're up on card advantage. Um, the Kai'Sa matchups, this is like the one time in the RQ where Purple Vex didn't really shine, other than the LeBlanc matchup, where Aurelia actually did a lot of work. Just because they had to recycle so much to try to kill the Aurelia, I had a good few disciplines, a few good on guards in hand. Really couldn't do much. And because of that, I was able to sneak past my win. I think I had a few really good hidden Zonias in reaction to like the scuttles, and then my Stalacorn was able to live. Um, it was honestly kind of cool too, because this person I fought him before it's on my local, so it's very, very strange to see him here. And yeah, exactly. I was able to sneak my win pass on that one, and as I was going to match 8, I really didn't expect to win. At Atlanta, I went 5-3, so it's kind of like deja vu, where I was stuck in like the same situation I was gonna be in, and it was a jinx. I at the end, Green Yasuo finally clutched up, and he was able to conquer both battlefields. Rebuke won me the game that time. Flash did really well game two. So honestly, the thing that made me win that matchup was Jinx rewards you for having little cards in your hand, and because he had little cards in his hand, I could just play around maybe one card instead of having to worry about like 5 cards. His color combo super good, but at the same time, a little rough for him just because I got so much interaction. He can only have one piece of interaction in his hand. And yeah, after that, I was secured best of Yasuo. When it went into day two, I honestly didn't know if I was allowed to drop and still get the best of, so I kind of just played it out. I was playing a little more chill. I wasn't like taking too many notes. I fought a LeBlanc round one, who again coincidentally has the same name as another person, one of my locals. It was not the person, just completely the same name. It was really weird. I took a game off of him. After that, it was just, after that, I confirmed with the judges I was allowed to drop. I did some side events and I had a lot of fun. But
Oh.
that's like how my run really went for the best of Yasuo, and it was honestly like kind of crazy that I got 2 buys pretty much. But other than that, all the other matchups, I felt like I played pretty well. My opponents played pretty well, so we got it in the end, which is what I wanted to do since set one. So we're doing good here.
Well, if it means anything, I think you beat the fraud allegation.
Yep. I hope I did. Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about mashup spreads. Do you want to perhaps like go over like at least the more popular ones one by one?
Okay,
Yeah.
so let me see here. Matchup spread. When I'm talking about like Master Yi, like I said, this deck is made for Master Yi. The one Master Yi I did fight was like, yeah, no, this deck felt like pretty deliberating for me because everything they do has to be a commitment from their part. What's it called? Tries to reward you having to react to them, and then they have one thing, and then now they're back over you. Their card advantage is a lot less, just because they're not able to run that many card draw spells except for like Scuttle and Discipline. Once you get rid of most of the stuff in their hand, they can't really do anything. So if you're able to get over them somehow and get rid of the cards in their hand and get rid of most of their runes, there's not a lot they can do. If you star cross one of their things back, they have to spend an entire turn playing that unit again, not even out of battlefield. Because of that, the Master Yi matchup, I don't want to say is favored just because that deck is still absurdly strong, but it is better than a lot of matchups. I want to say it's more 50-50 just because if it's a good Yi player and they can play around most of your stuff, and they like somehow know how to play around purple Vex and everything like that, and they have a really good hand, that can very easily just go to Yi. But if you're playing really well and you know the Yi matchup because you fought it a lot, the matchup can be very favored towards you as well. The second matchup that you gotta take into account is Diana. Diana is a good matchup for this deck if they cannot Starcross loop you. If you just play a Vex on curve and pass, and they can Starcross, next turn, Starcross Fizz, next turn, Starcrossed again. If they can get you in that loop, you are in a very bad spot. But if you are able to defy one of those, if you're able to play an Irelia instead of a Vex, and you can force them to pay deflect on stuff, you are in a lot of a better spot. Just because a lot of their spells can kind of be deliberate. A lot of the green purple spells can be good into Diana more than Diana can be good into you with her kind of spells. Because of that, I want to say it is Yasuo favored, but at the same time, I don't think I fought a single Diana in my run. So it's hard to say. I fought some Dianas at my locals, and I felt like this deck was pretty strong into it. But I can definitely see this matchup being very reminiscent of like Irelia versus Diana, which I believe is a very 50-50, very heavily skill dependent matchup. Um, the other matchup I did not fight, but was kind of bordered against was Irelia. Irelia's biggest, something that separates a good Irelia from, I don't want to say like a bad Irelia player, is rune management. I think the hardest thing an Irelia player can do is manage the runes correctly. Purple Vex throws a wrench in every good Irelia player's rune management super hard. If Irelia has little runes to work with, they have little answers to play with, and they can do so little. But having a Purple Vex on the field and forcing them to use those runes or use all their precious spells beforehand, it kind of works like a Bryn here, or it kind of works as a way to just make them waste so many resources, and then you can just slowly come back. Because of that, I do also want to say that that matchup is very 50-50, very skill dependent. Because I feel like if you are fighting a Irelia and you just play around most of their stuff because you know the Irelia matchup, you can play around it pretty much perfectly, and a purple Vex is just kind of like an added gut punch to like the whole matchup itself. Um, I hate to say that all like my good matchups are really 50-50, but that's just the truth of it. My deck, you are playing down a legend and a signature spell. You are playing with a good color pairing and an ability that, let's be honest, works the best with Stellacorn Herder. Um, because of that, the good matchup in this deck are still very skill dependent. If like I can get completely washed by good Aurelius, by good Diana players, and there's just little I can do just because they're just that good. But the other matchups that I want, the other like big matchups in the formats, let me see here. When I think of Leblanc, I think Leblanc is just a hard matchup because I just don't have the stuff in the main board to really deal with her. Because there's so little stuff in the main board to deal with her, it's simply a pre like a post sideboard matchup you can really bet on. Like even after round one, I was asking my friends like, "Hey, are you sure I should start Rockball Path blind? Like I feel like that's a strong battlefield to have like going first or something." They said, "No, you kind of just have to luck it out and hopefully you can squeak the win pass on game one," which it did work. I did win one of the Irelia matchups I had. But the LeBlanc matchup is not favored until you sideboard. Once you sideboard, it's favored just because these purple can completely screw over a LeBlanc. I had saw so many LeBlanc players complaining about purple throughout the entire weekend just because how absurdly strong bounce is to LeBlanc. The other popular matchups are like Aurora. Aurora is a strange one because the only like things I can really do to an Aurora to slow them down is like star crossing their Elder Drag. For Aurora, you have to hard mull to find your units and to stay on the point tempo. The biggest strength Yasuo has that Aurelia like kind of falls in is his ability to be able to gank without recycling. On Aurelia, you may see Aurelia versus Aurora matchups. They have to recycle like two a turn just to gank both battlefields to keep up in point tempo. If the Aurora players can't deal with your Tide Turners or your Scuttle Crabs or your Stellacorns, you can get good card advantage. You can gank every single turn. You can stay up on points. But it's also very tricky because if those are dealt with, you are in a bad spot because you just are not faster than like an aggro Yasuo would be. And because of that, I don't want to say Aurora is unfavored, but it's very draw dependent on what you get. If you get a Star Cross with two drops in hand, you are looking pretty good for yourself. If they are behind a whole turn, you're able to buy your turn by playing like a Stellacorn. You're able to get to 7 points, and it's a lot easier to win off 7. It's the Aurora matchup is something you just have to deal with if you want to be able to have good matchups into the other decks. The other ones that have kind of been popping up in popularity are like Azir and like kind of like mainly gear reliant decks. I know I don't see many Lucians, but it's still a gear deck that you have to like kind of keep track of. Into Azir, the matchup is just hard because most of your bounce spells are less valuable into an Azir because they will just put the equipment on something else and swing up with it. Because of that, that matchup is very hard because you have to somehow get around that. You have to hope they don't have little gears in hand. It is a matchup that is very decent sideboard. It's post sideboard because you're able to put a Dapatron. But before that, it is tougher just because Purple Vex has little inside matchup other than like Hidden Blade, for example, or the Disciplines. Your deck is not functioned around dealing with a ton of small stuff. It's around making them commit onto one big guy and then bouncing it back to their hand, which is super hard to do into Azir. So Azir, I don't want to say is unfavored, but it is not like super in your favor. The last one I want to talk about is Pike. I think Pike. I've seen some more control variations of Pike recently, but if it is just what's it called, like the hand rip Pike,
Mhm.
I'm not too worried about hand rip. Just because if you somehow get a Cellcorn Herder and you're able to slam it, they don't have an answer for it. Hand rip won't do anything to you. You're able to draw 2 off Cellcorn every turn. Just because you have your champion unit, you have Ride the Wind, you can draw even more. You are able to typically keep up with a lot of the Pike before they're able to get their combo fully going, which I think is a strength. But at the same time, if you don't have the Cellcorn in hand and you aren't able to keep up at all, you're just kind of stuck discarding your hand and you aren't in a good spot at all. I do want to say I think it is favored just because I think the color pairing is also decent into Pike. But other than that, I think I built this deck with the intention of having good matchups into the big three of like the new set, and I think I did that well. I think it's good into I think it's good into Diana. I think it's good into Aurelia, and I think it's good into E, which is what I was going for.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I think that just about does it for today. Do you have any closing thoughts on this deck, or like maybe your predictions on how well it's gonna do in the future, if anyone cares?
I don't really think a lot of Yasuo stuff has a place in the future. Maybe Windwall. That's a Yasuo kind of card,
Oh
right?
yeah, that's true.
Uh, I think that I think Yasuo is. I'm super pumped that I got it because I feel like Yasuo is kind of like an iconic lead character. I don't want to like predict that they're going to do more Yasuo cards in the future, but I don't see a reason why they wouldn't just make Yasuo 2 in a later set. He's super popular and he used to be my one trick in the league. That's why I kind of play him. But I don't. There's definitely room to be improved in the deck list, but I feel like this should be a really good shell of what it should look like if you want to do good into the meta. If you guys want to change anything around on it, you're completely free to. I know we're getting to Vendetta soon, but if you guys ever want to like see the deck list and see if you want to tweak anything, the shell is right here if you guys want to just like adjust it at all to however you like.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, I guess that's it for today. Yeah, thank you for your time, Complex.
All right, no problem. Yep. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. I've been wanting to talk about it for a while. I know I've been slacking a little bit, a little burnt out, but you know we're getting there. Yeah, we were here.